worldly affairs, both political and social. Samika Muni also, after regretting the incident, conveyed the news to the king as a matter of duty, so that the king would be able to prepare himself to go back to Godhead. Samika Muni sent news to the king that foolish Shringi, his son, although a powerful Brahman boy, unfortunately had misused his spiritual power by cursing the king unwarrantedly. The incident of the king's garlanding the Muni was not sufficient cause of being cursed to death. But since there was no way to retract the curse, the king was informed to prepare for death within a week. Both Samika Muni and the king were self realized souls. Samika Muni was a mystic, and Maharaj Parikshit was a devotee. Therefore, there was no difference between them in self realization. Neither of them were afraid of meeting death. Maharaj Parikshit could have gone to the Muni to beg his pardon, but the news of imminent death was conveyed to the king with so much regret by the Muni that the king did not want to shame the Muni further by his presence there. He decided to prepare himself for his imminent death and find out the way to go back to Godhead. The life of a human being is a chance to prepare oneself to go back to Godhead or to get rid of material existence, the repetition of birth and death. Thus, in the system of Varnashram Dharma, every man and woman is trained for this purpose. In other words, the system of Varnashram Dharma is also is known also as Sanatan Dharma or the eternal occupation. The system of Varnashram Dharma prepares a man for going back to Godhead, and thus a householder is ordered to go to the forest as Vanaprastha to acquire complete knowledge and then to take sannyas prior to his inevitable death. Parikshit Maharaj was fortunate to get a 7-day notice to meet his inevitable death. But for the common man, there is no definite notice, although death is inevitable for all. Foolish men forget this sure fact of death and neglect the duty of preparing themselves for going back to God. They spoil their lives in animal propensities to eat, drink, be merry, and enjoy. Such an irresponsible life is adopted by the people in the age of Kali because of a sinful desire to condemn Brahmanical culture, God consciousness, and cow protection, for which the state is responsible. The state must employ revenue to advance these three items and thus educate the populace to prepare for death. The state which does so is the real welfare state. The state of India should better follow the example of Maharaj Parikshit, the ideal executive head, than to imitate other materialistic states which have no idea of the kingdom of Godhead, the ultimate goal of human life. Deterioration of the ideal Deterioration of the ideals of Indian civilization has brought about the deterioration of civic life, not only in India but also abroad. Translation: Maharaj Parikshit sat down firmly on the banks of the Ganges to concentrate his mind in Krishna consciousness, rejecting all other practices of self-realization, because transcendental loving service to Krishna is the greatest achievement, superseding all other methods. Purport: for a devotee like Maharaj Parikshit, none of the material planets, even the topmost Brahmaloka, is as desirable as Goloka Vrindavan, the abode of Lord Sri Krishna, the primeval Lord and the original personality of Godhead. This earth is one of the innumerable material planets within the universe, and there are innumerable universes also within the compass of the Mahat Tattva. The devotees are told by the Lord and his representatives, the spiritual masters or acharyas, that not one of the planets within the innumerable universes is suitable for the residential purposes of a devotee. The devotee always desires to go back home, back to Godhead, just to become one of the associates of the Lord in the capacity of servitor, friend, parent, or conjugal lover of the Lord, either in one of the innumerable Vaikuntha planets or in Goloka Vrindavan, the planet of Lord Sri Krishna. All these planets are eternally situated in the spiritual sky, the Paravyoma, which is on the other side of the causal ocean within the Mahat Tattva. Maharaj Parikshit was already aware of all this information due to his accumulated piety and birth in a high family of devotees, Vaishnavas, and thus he was not at all interested in the material planets. Modern scientists are very eager to reach the moon by material arrangements, but they cannot perceive of the highest planet of this universe. But a devotee like Maharaj Parikshit does not care a fig for the moon, or for that matter, any of the material planets. So when he was assured of his death on a fixed date, he became more determined in the transcendental loving service of Lord Krishna by complete fasting on the bank of the transcendental river Yamuna, which flows down by the capital of Hastinapur in the Delhi state. Both the Ganges and Yamuna are Amartya, transcendental rivers, and the Yamuna is still more sanctified for the following reasons. Translation: the river Ganges, by which the king sat to fast, carries the most auspicious water, which is mixed with the dust of the lotus feet of the Lord and tulsi leaves. Therefore, that water sanctifies the three worlds inside and outside, and even sanctifies Lord Shiva and other demigods. Consequently, everyone who is destined to die must take shelter of this river. Purport: Maharaj Parikshit, just after receiving the news of his death, within 7 days, at once retired from family life and shifted himself to the sacred bank of the Yamuna river. Generally, it is said that the king took shelter on the bank of the Ganges, but according to Srila Jiva Goswami, the king took shelter on the bank of the Yamuna. Srila Jiva Goswami's statement appears to be more accurate because of the geographical situation. Maharaj Parikshit resided in his capital Hastinapur, situated near present Delhi. and, the, and the river Yamuna flows down past the city. Naturally, the king would take shelter of the river Yamuna because she was flowing past his palace door. As far as sanctity is concerned, the river Yamuna is more directly connected with Lord Krishna than the Ganges. The Lord sanctified the river Yamuna from the beginning of his transcendental pastimes in the world. While his father Vasudev was crossing the Yamuna with baby Krishna for a safe place at Gokul, on the other bank of the river from Mathura, the Lord fell down in the river, and by the dust of his lotus feet, the river at once became sanctified. It is specially mentioned herein that Maharaj Parikshit took shelter of that particular river, which is beautifully flowing, carrying the dust of the lotus feet of Lord Krishna mixed with tulsi leaves. Lord Krishna's lotus feet are always besmeared with the tulsi leaves, and thus, as soon as his lotus feet contact the river of the Ganges and the Yamuna, the river become at once sanctified. The Lord, however, contacted the river Yamuna more than the Ganges, according to the Varaha Puran, as quoted by Srila Jiva Goswami. There is no difference between the water of the Ganges and the Yamuna, but when the water of the Ganges is sanctified 100 times, it is called the Yamuna. Similarly, it is said in the scriptures that 1000 names of Vishnu are equal to one name of Rama, and 3 names of Lord Rama are equal to one name of Krishna. Translation: thus the king, the worthy descendant of the Pandavas, decided once and for all and sat on the Ganges bank to fast until death and give himself up to the lotus feet of Lord Krishna, who alone is able to award liberation. So, freeing himself from all kinds of associations and attachments, he accepted the vows of a sage. Purport: the water of the Ganges sanctifies all the 3 worlds, including the gods and the demigods, because it emanates from the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vishnu. Lord Krishna is the fountainhead of the principle of Vishnu Tattva, and therefore, shelter of his lotus feet can deliver one from all sins, including an offense committed by a king unto a Brahmana. Maharaj Parikshit therefore decided to meditate upon the lotus feet of Lord Sri Krishna, who is Mukunda, or the giver of liberations of all description. The banks of the Ganges or the Yamuna give one a chance to remember the Lord continuously. Maharaj Parikshit freed himself from all sorts of material association and meditated upon the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. That is the way of liberation. To be free from all material association to be free from all material association means to cease completely from committing any further sins. To meditate upon the lotus feet of the Lord means to become free from the effects of all previous sins. The conditions of the material world are so made that one has to commit sins, willingly or unwillingly. The best example is Maharaj Parikshit himself, who was a recognized sinless pious king. But he also became a victim of an offense, even though he was ever unwilling to commit such a mistake. He was cursed also, but because he was a great devotee of the Lord, even such reverses in life became favorable. The principle is that the principle is that one should not willingly commit any sin in his life. And the principle is that one should not willingly commit any sin in his life and should constantly remember the lotus feet of the Lord without deviation. Only in such a mood will the Lord help the devotee make regular progress toward the path of liberation and thus attain the lotus feet of the Lord. Even if there are accidental sins committed by the devotee, the Lord saves the surrendered souls from all sins as confirmed in all the scriptures. Translation. At that time, all the great minds and thinkers, accompanied by their disciples and sages, who could verily sanctify a place of pilgrimage just by their presence, arrived there on the plea of making a pilgrim's journey. Purport. When Maharaj Parikshit sat down on the bank of the Ganges, the news spread in all directions of the universe, and the great-minded sages, who could follow the importance of the occasion, all arrived there on the plea of pilgrimage. Actually, they came to meet Maharaj Parikshit and not to take a bath of pilgrimage, because all of them were competent enough to sanctify the places of pilgrimage. Common men go to pilgrimage sites to get themselves purified of all sins. Thus, the places of pilgrimage become overburdened with the sins of others. But when such sages visit overburdened places of pilgrimage, they sanctify the places by their presence. Therefore, the sages who came to meet Maharaj Parikshit were not very much interested in getting themselves purified like common men. But on the plea of taking a bath, in that place they came to meet Maharaj Parikshit because they could foresee that Srimad Bhagavatam would be spoken by Shukdev Goswami. All of them wanted to take advantage of the great occasion. Translation. From different parts of the universe, there arrived great sages like Atri, Kyavan, Saradvan, Arishtanemi, Bhrigu, Vashishta, Parashar, Vishwamitra, Angira, Parshuram, Uthatya, Indra Pramada, Idvamahu, Medhatithi, Devala, Arishtisena, Bharadvaj, Gautama, Pipilada, Maitreya, Aurva, Kavasa, Kumbhayoni, Dvaipayan, and the great personality Narada. Purport. Kyavan, a great sage and one of the sons of Bhrigu Muni. He was born prematurely when his pregnant mother was kidnapped. Kyavan is one of the 6 sons of his father. Bhrigu. Bhrigu. When Brahmaji was performing a great sacrifice on behalf of Varuna, Maharshi Bhrigu was born from the sacrificial fire. He was a great sage, and his very dear life was Puloma. He could travel in space like Durvasa, Narada, and others. And he used to visit all the planets of the universe. Before the battle of Kurukshetra, he tried to stop the battle. Sometimes he instructed Bharadwaj Muni about astronomical evolution, and he is the author of the great Bhrigu Samhita, the great astrological calculation. He explained how air, fire, water, and earth are generated from ether. He explained how the air in the stomach works and regulates the intestines. As a great philosopher, he logically established the eternity of the living entity, Mahabharata. He was also a great anthropologist and the theory of evolution was long ago explained by him. He was a he was a scientific propounder of the four divisions and orders of human society known as the Varnashrama institution. He converted the Kshatriya king Vitahavya into a Brahmana. Vasishtha, see Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st canto, 9th chapter, verse 6. Parashar. He is the grandson of Vasishtha Muni and the father of Vyasadeva. He is the son of Maharshi Shakti and his mother's name was Adrishyati. He was in the womb of his mother when she was only 12 years old. And from within the womb of his mother, he learned the Vedas. His father was killed by a demon, Kalmashapad, and to avenge this, he wanted to annihilate the whole world. He was restrained, however, by his grandfather Vasishtha. He then performed a Rakshas killing yagya, but Maharshi Pulastya restrained him. He begot Vyasadeva, being attracted by Satyavati, who was to become the wife of Maharaj Santanu. But the blessings of Parashar, Satyavati became fragrant for miles. He was present also during the time of Bhishma's death. He was spiritual master of Maharaj Janak and a great devotee of Lord Shiva. He is the author of many Vedic scriptures and sociological directions. Gadhi Sutta or Vishwamitra, a great sage of austerity and mystic power. He is famous as Gadhi Sutta. Gadhi Sutta or Vishwamitra, a great sage of austerity and mystic power. He is famous as Gadhi Sutta because his father was Gadhi, a powerful king of the province of Kanyakubja, part of Uttar Pradesh. Although he was a Kshatriya by birth, he became a Brahmana in the very same body by the power of his spiritual achievements. He picked a quarrel with Vasishtha Muni when he was a Kshatriya king and performed a great sacrifice in cooperation with Maganga Muni and thus was able to vanquish the sons of Vasishtha. He became a great yogi and yet he failed to check his senses and thus was obliged to become the father of Shakuntala, the beauty queen of world history. Once, when he was a Kshatriya king, he visited the hermitage of Vasishtha Muni and he was given a royal reception. Vishwamitra wanted from Vasishtha a cow named Nandini and the Muni refused to deliver it. Vishwamitra stole the cow and thus there was a quarrel between the sage and the king. Vishwamitra was defeated by the spiritual strength of Vasishtha and thus the king decided to become a Brahmana. Before becoming a Brahmana, he underwent severe austerity on the bank of the Kaushika. He was also one who tried to stop the Kurukshetra war. Angira. He is one of the 6 mental sons of Brahma and the father of Brihaspati, the great learned priest of the demigods in the heavenly planets. He was born of the semen of Brahmaji given to a cinder of fire. Utatya and Samvarta are his sons. It is said that he is still performing austerity and chanting the holy name of the Lord at a place known as Alokananda on the banks of the Ganges. Parshuram, Sri Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st canto, 9th chapter, verse 6. Utatya, one of the 3 sons of Maharshi Angira. He was the spiritual master of Maharaj Mandhata. He married Bhadra, the daughter of Soma, moon. Varuna kidnapped his wife Bhadra and to retaliate the offense of the god of water, he drank all the water of the world. Medhatithi, an old sage of Yoga, an assembly member of the heavenly king Indradeva. His son was Kanva Muni, who brought up Shakuntala in the forest. He was promoted to the heavenly planet by strictly following the principles of retired life, Vanaprastha. Devala, a great authority like Narad Muni and Vyasdev. His good name is on the list of authorities mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita. When Arjuna acknowledged Lord Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he met Maharaj Yudhishthir after the battle of Kurukshetra, and he was the elder brother of Dhaumya, the priest of the Pandava family.
What's the date today?
Maharaj, today is 13th of December. He was the elder brother of Dhaumya, the priest of the Pandava family. Like the Kshatriyas, he also allowed his daughter to select her own husband in a Swayamvara meeting. And that ceremony, all the bachelor sons of the rishis were invited. According to some, he is not Asita Devala. Bharadwaj, Sri Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st canto, 9th chapter, verse 6. Gautama, one of the great sage, one of the 7 great sages of the universe. Sharadvan Gautama was one of his sons. Persons in the Gautama Gotra dynasty today are either his family descendants or in his disciplic succession. The Brahmanas who profess Gautama Gotra are generally family descendants, and Kshatriyas and Vaishyas who profess Gautama Gotra are all in the line of his disciplic succession. He was the husband of the famous Ahalya, who turned into stone when Indradev, the king of the heaven, molested her. Ahalya was delivered by Lord Ramchandra. Gautama was the grandfather of Kripacharya, one of the heroes of the battle of Kurukshetra. Maitreya, a great rishi of yoga. He was spiritual master of Vidura and a great religious authority. He advised Dhritarashtra to keep good relations with the Pandavas. Duryodhan disagreed and thus was cursed by him. He met Vyasadeva and had religious discourses with him. Translation. There were also many other saintly demigods, kings, and special royal orders called Arunadayas, a special rank of Rajarshis, from different dynasties of the sages. When they all assembled together to meet the emperor Parikshit, he received them properly and bowed his head to the ground. Purport. The system of bowing the head to the ground to show respect to superiors is an excellent etiquette which obliges the honored guest deep into the heart. Even the first grade offender is excused simply by this process. And Maharaj Parikshit, although honored by all the rishis and kings, welcomed all the big men in that humble etiquette in order to be excused from any offenses. Generally, at the last stage of one's life, this humble method is adopted by every sensible man in order to be excused before departure. In this way, Maharaj Parikshit implored everyone's goodwill for going back home, back to Godhead. Translation. After all the rishis and others had seated themselves comfortably, the king, humbly standing before them with folded hands, told them of his decision to fast until death. Purport. Although the king had already decided to fast until death on the bank of the Ganges, he humbly expressed his decision to elicit the opinions of the great authorities present there. Any decision, however important, should be confirmed by some authority. This makes the matter perfect. This means that the monarchs who ruled the earth in those days were not irresponsible dictators. They scrupulously followed the authoritative decisions of the sages and saints in terms of Vedic injunction. Maharaj Parikshit, as a perfect king, followed the principles by consulting the authorities, even up to the last days of his life. Translation. The fortunate king said, "Indeed, we are the most grateful of all the kings who were trained to get favors from the great souls. Certainly you, sages, consider royalty as refuse to be rejected and left in a distant place." Purport. According to religious principles, stool, urine, wash water, etc. must be left at a long distance. Attached bathrooms, urinals, etc. may be very convenient amenities of modern civilization, but they are ordered to be situated at a distance from residential quarters. That very example is cited herein in relation to the kingly order for those who are progressively marching back to Godhead. Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said that to be in intimate touch with dollars and cents men or the kingly order is worse than suicide for one who decides to go back to Godhead. In other words, the transcendentalists do not generally associate with men who are too enamored by the external beauty of God's creation. By advanced knowledge and spiritual realization, the transcendentalist knows that this beautiful material kingdom is nothing but a shadowy reflection of the reality, the kingdom of God. They are not therefore very much captivated by royal opulence or anything like that. But in the case of Maharaj Parikshit, the situation was different. Apparently, the king was condemned to death by an inexperienced Brahmana boy, but factually, he was called by the Lord to return to him. Other transcendentalists, the great sages and mystics who assembled together because of Maharaj Parikshit's fasting unto death, were quite anxious to see him, for he was going back to Godhead. Maharaj Parikshit also could understand that the great sages who assembled there were all kind to his forefathers, the Pandavas, because of their devotional service to the Lord. He therefore felt grateful to the sages for being present there at the last stage of his life, and he felt that it was all due to the greatness of his late forefathers or grandfathers. He felt proud, therefore, that he happened to be the descendant of such great devotees. Such pride for the devotees of the Lord is certainly not equal to the puffed up sense of vanity for material prosperity. The first is reality, whereas the other is false and vain.
Where do you stay?
Maharaj Indrapura. That's about it.
Hyderabad.
Yes, Maharaj.
You were coming every Sunday before, no?
Yes, Maharaj.
But you were not coming every Sunday, now are you?
Maharaj, I try to come to the temple every Sunday.
You used to come with your sister and father, no?
Oh, yes, Maharaj. I came yesterday also for the lecture.
They still come? You come regularly, no? Yeah?
रेगुलर आते हैं
You come regularly to the temple?
ना रेगुलर आते हैं ना
Yes, Maharaj.
जवाब नहीं देते।
बस ऐसे सुनाए
ये sister and father, they also come. Regularly, no?
Yes, Maharaj. Maharaj, may I continue? Okay. Translation. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, the controller of both the transcendental and mundane worlds, has graciously overtaken me in the form of a Brahmana's curse. Due to my being too much attached to family life, the Lord, in order to save me, has appeared before me in such a way that only out of fear I will detach myself from the world. Purport. Maharaj Parikshit, although born in a family of great devotees, the Pandavas, and although securely trained in transcendental attachment for the association of the Lord, still found the allurement of mundane family life so strong that he had to be detached by a plan of the Lord. Such direct action is taken by the Lord in the case of a special devotee. Maharaj Parikshit could understand this by the presence of the topmost transcendentalist in the universe. The Lord resides with his devotees, and therefore the presence of the great saints indicated the presence of the Lord. The king therefore welcomed the presence of the great rishis as a mark of favor of the Supreme Lord. Translation. O Brahmanas, just accept me as a completely surrendered soul, and let Mother Ganges, the representative of the Lord, also accept me in that way. For I have already taken the lotus feet of the Lord into my heart. Let the snake bird, or whatever magical thing the Brahmana created, bite me at once. I only desire that you all continue singing the deeds of Lord Vishnu. Purport. As soon as one is given up completely unto the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, he is not at all afraid of death. The atmosphere created by the presence of the great devotees of the Lord on the bank of the Ganges and Maharaj Parikshit's complete acceptance of the Lord's lotus feet was sufficient guarantee to the king for going back to Godhead. He thus became absolutely free from all fear of death. Translation. Again offering obeisances unto all you Brahmanas, I pray that if I should again take my birth in the material world, I will have complete attachment to the unlimited Lord Krishna, association with his devotees, and friendly relations with all living beings. Purport. That a devotee of the Lord is the only perfect living being is explained herein by Maharaj Parikshit. A devotee of the Lord is no one's enemy, although there may be many enemies of a devotee. A devotee of the Lord does not like to associate with non-devotees, although he has no enmity with them. He desires association with the devotees of the Lord. This is perfectly natural because birds of the same feather mix together. And the most important function of a devotee is to have complete attachment for Lord Sri Krishna, the Father of all living beings. As a good son of the Father behaves in a friendly way with all his other brothers, so also the devotee of the Lord, being a good son of the Supreme Father, Lord Krishna, sees all other living beings in relation with the Supreme Father. He tries to bring back the upstart sons of the Father to a saner stage and to get them to accept the supreme fatherhood of God. Maharaj Parikshit was certainly going back to Godhead, but even if he were not to go back, he prayed for a pattern of life which is the most perfect way in the material world. A pure devotee does not desire the company of a personality as great as Brahma, but he prefers the association of a petty living being, provided he is a devotee of the Lord. Translation: in perfect self-control, Maharaj Parikshit sat down on a seat of straw with straw roots facing the east, placed on the southern bank of the Ganges, and he himself faced the north. Just previously, he had given charge of his kingdom over to his son. Purport: the river Ganges is celebrated as the wife of the sea. The seed of Kusha straw is considered to be sanctified if the straw is taken out of the earth complete with root, and if the root is pointed towards the east, it is considered to be auspicious. Facing the north is still more favorable for attaining spiritual success. Maharaj Parikshit handed over the charge of the administration to his son before leaving home. He was thus fully equipped for all favorable conditions. Translation: thus the king, Maharaj Parikshit, sat to fast until death. All the demigods of the higher planets praised the king's action, and in pleasure continually scattered flowers over the earth and beat celestial drums. Purport: even up to the time of Maharaj Parikshit, there were interplanetary communications. The news of Maharaj Parikshit's fasting unto death to attain salvation reached the higher planets in the sky, where the intelligent demigods live. The demigods are more luxurious than human beings, but all of them are obedient to the orders of the Supreme Lord. There is no one in the heavenly planets who is an atheist or non-believer. Thus, any devotee of the Lord on the surface of the earth is always praised by them. And in the case of Maharaj Parikshit, they were greatly delighted and thus gave tokens of honor by scattering flowers over the earth and by beating celestial drums. A demigod takes pleasure in seeing someone go back to Godhead. He is always pleased with the devotee of the Lord, so much so that by his adhidaivic powers, he may help the devotees in all respects, and by their actions, the Lord is pleased with them. There is an invisible chain of complete cooperation between the Lord, the demigods, and the devotee of the Lord on earth. Translation: all the great sages who were assembled there also praised the decision of Maharaj Parikshit, and they expressed their approval by saying, "Very good." Naturally, the sages were inclined to do good to common men, for they have all the qualitative powers of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, they were very much pleased to see Maharaj Parikshit, a devotee of the Lord, and they spoke as follows. Purport: the natural beauty of a living being is enhanced by rising up to the platform of devotional service. Maharaj Parikshit was absorbed in attachment for Lord Krishna. Seeing this, the great sages assembled were very pleased, and they expressed their approval by saying, "Very good." Such sages are naturally inclined to do good to the common man. And when they see a personality like Maharaj Parikshit advance in devotional service, their pleasure knows no bounds, and they offer all blessings in their power. The devotional service of the Lord is so auspicious that all demigods and sages, up to the Lord Himself, become pleased with the devotee, and therefore the devotee finds everything auspicious. All inauspicious matters are removed from the path of a progressive devotee. Meeting all the great sages at the time of death are certainly auspicious for Maharaj Parikshit, and thus he was blessed by a so-called curse of a Brahmana's boy. Translation: the sages said, "O chief of all saintly kings of the Pandu dynasty, who was strictly in the line of Lord Sri Krishna, it is not at all astonishing that you give up your throne, which is decorated with the helmets of so many kings, to achieve eternal association with the personality of Godhead." Purport: foolish politicians who hold political administrative posts think that the temporary posts they occupy are the highest material gain of life, and therefore they stick to those posts even up to the last moment of life, without knowing that achievement of liberation as one of the associate as one sorry, without knowing that achievement of liberation as one of the associates of the Lord in his eternal abode is the highest gain of life. The human life is meant for achieving this end. The Lord has assured us in the Bhagavad Gita many times that going back to Godhead, his eternal abode, is the highest achievement. Prahlad Maharaj, while praying to Lord Nrsimha, said, quote, "O my Lord, I am very much afraid of the materialistic way of life, and I am not the least afraid of your present ghastly, ferocious nature as Nrsimha Dev. This materialistic way of life is something like a grinding stone, and we are being crushed by it. We have fallen into this horrible whirlpool of the tossing waves of life. And thus, my Lord, I pray at your lotus feet to call me back to your eternal abode as one of your servitors." This is the summit liberation of this materialistic way of life. I have very bitter experience of the materialistic way of life. In whichever species of life I have taken birth, compelled by the force of my own activities, I have very painfully experienced two things, namely, separation from my beloved and meeting with what is not wanted. And to contract them, the remedies which I undertook were more dangerous than the disease itself. So I drift from one point to another, birth after birth. And I pray to you, therefore, to give me a shelter at your lotus feet. Unquote. The Pandava kings, who are more than many saints of the world, knew the bitter results of the materialistic way of life. They were never captivated by the glare of the imperial throne they occupied, and they sought always the opportunity of being called by the Lord to associate with him eternally. Maharaj Parikshit was the worthy grandson of Maharaj Yudhishthir. Maharaj Yudhishthir gave up the imperial throne to his grandson. And similarly, Maharaj Parikshit, the grandson of Maharaj Yudhishthir, gave up the imperial throne to his son Janmeja. That is the way of all the kings in the dynasty because they are all strictly in the line of Lord Krishna. Thus, the devotees of the Lord are never enchanted with the glare of materialistic life, and they live impartially, attached to the objects of the false, illusory, materialistic way of life. Translation: we shall all wait here until the foremost devotee of the Lord, Maharaj Parikshit, returns to the supreme planet, which is completely free from all mundane contamination and all kinds of lamentation. Purport: beyond the limitation of the material creation, which is compared to the cloud in the sky, there is the Paravyoma, or the spiritual sky, full of planets called Vaikunthas. Such Vaikuntha planets are also differently known as Purushottama Lok, Achyutya Lok, Trivikrama Lok, Rishikesha Lok, Keshava Lok, Aniruddha Lok, Madhava Lok, Pradyumna Lok, Sankarshana Lok, Sridhara Lok, Vasudeva Lok, Ayodhya Lok, Dwarka Lok, and many other millions of spiritual lokas, wherein the personality of Godhead predominates. All the living entities there are liberated souls with spiritual bodies as good as that of the Lord. There is no material contamination. Everything there is spiritual, and therefore there is nothing objectively lamentable. They are full of transcendental bliss, and are without birth, death, old age, and disease. And amongst all the above mentioned Vaikuntha lokas, there is one supreme lok called Goloka Vrindavan, which is the abode of the Lord Shri. Sorry, no? There is one supreme lok called Goloka Vrindavan, which is the abode of Lord Shri Krishna and his specific associates. Maharaj Parikshit was destined to achieve this particular lok, and the great rishis assembled there could foresee this. All of them consulted among themselves about the great departure of the great king, and they wanted to see him up to the last moment, because they would no more be able to see such a great devotee of the Lord. When a great devotee of the Lord passes away, there is nothing to be lamented, because the devotee is destined to enter into the kingdom of God. He is already making it. But the sorry plight is that such great devotees leave our sight, and therefore there is every reason to be sorry. As the Lord is rarely to be seen by our present eyes, so also are the great devotees. The great rishis, therefore, correctly decided to remain on the spot until the last moment. Translation. All that was spoken by the great sages was very sweet to hear, full of meaning, and appropriately presented as perfectly true. So, after hearing them, Maharaj Parikshit, desiring to hear the activities of the Lord, the personality of Godhead, congratulated the great sages. Translation. The king said, O great sages, you have all very kindly assembled here, having come from all parts of the universe. You are all as good as the supreme knowledge personified, who resides in the planet above the three worlds, Satyalok. Consequently, you are naturally inclined to do good to others. But for this, you have no interest, either in this life or in the next. Purport. Six kinds of opulences, namely wealth, strength, fame, beauty, knowledge, and renunciation, are all originally the different attributes pertaining to the absolute personality of Godhead. The living beings who are part and parcel entities of the Supreme Being, and all these attributes partially, up to the full strength of 78%. In the material world, these attributes, up to 78% of the Lord's attributes, are covered by the material energy, as the sun is covered by a cloud. The covered strength of the sun is very dim compared to the original glare. And similarly, the original color of the living beings with such attributes becomes almost extinct. There are three planetary systems, namely the lower world, intermediate worlds, and the upper worlds. The human beings on earth are situated at the beginning of the intermediate worlds, but living beings like Brahma and his contemporaries live in the upper worlds, of which the topmost is Satyalok. In Satyalok, the inhabitants are fully cognizant of Vedic wisdom, and thus the mystic cloud of material energy is cleared. Therefore, they are known as the Vedas personified. Such persons, being fully aware of knowledge, both mundane and transcendental, have no interest in either the mundane or transcendental worlds. They are practically desireless devotees. In the mundane world, they have nothing to achieve, and in the transcendental world, they are full in themselves. Then why do they come to the mundane world? They descend on different planets as messiahs by the order of the Lord to deliver the fallen souls. On the earth, they come down and do good to the people of the world in different circumstances, under different climatic influences. They have nothing to do in this world, save and accept, reclaim the fallen souls rotting in material existence, deluded by material energy. Translation. O trustworthy Brahmanas, I now ask you about my immediate duty. Please, after proper deliberation, tell me of the unalloyed duty of everyone in all circumstances, and specifically for those who are just about to die. Purport. In this verse, the king has placed two questions before the learned sages. The first question is, what is the duty of everyone in all circumstances? And the second question is, what is the specific duty of one who is to die very shortly? Of the two, the question relating to the dying man is most important, because everyone is a dying man, either very shortly or after 100 years. The duration of life is immaterial, but the duty of a dying man is very important. Maharaj Parikshit placed these two questions before Sukdev Goswami, also on his arrival, and practically the whole of the Srimad Bhagavatam, beginning from the second canto up to the last 12th canto, deals with these two questions. The conclusion arrived at thereof is that devotional service of the Lord Sri Krishna, as it is confirmed by the Lord himself in the last phases of the Bhagavad Gita, is the last word in relation to everyone's permanent duty in life. Maharaj Parikshit was already aware of this fact, but he wanted the great sages assembled there to unanimously give their verdict on his conviction, so that he might be able to go on with his confirmed duty without controversy. He has specially mentioned the word Shuddha, of perfectly correct. For transcendental realization or self-realization, many processes are recommended by various classes of philosophers. Some of them are first class methods, some of them are second or third class methods. Yes, Maharaj?
Time now.
Just a second. Six 29. Some of them are first class methods and some of them are second or third class methods. The first class method demands that one gives up all other methods and surrender unto the lotus feet of the Lord and thus be saved from all sins and the reactions. Translation. At that moment there appeared the powerful son of Vyasadeva, who travelled over the earth disinterested and satisfied with himself. He did not manifest any symptoms of belonging to any social order or status of life. He was surrounded with women and children, and he dressed as if others had neglected him. Purport. The word Bhagavan is sometimes used in relation with some of the great devotees of the Lord, like Shukdev Goswami. Such liberated souls are disinterested in the affairs of this material world because they are self-satisfied by the great achievements of devotional service. As explained before, Shukdev Goswami never accepted any formal spiritual master, nor did he undergo any formal reformatory performances. His father Vyasadeva was his natural spiritual master, because Shukdev Goswami heard Srimad Bhagavatam from him. After this, he became completely self-satisfied. Thus, he was not dependent on any formal process. The formal processes are necessary for those who are expected to reach the stage of complete liberation. But Sri Shukdev Goswami was already in that status by the grace of his father. As a young boy, he was expected to be properly dressed, but he went about naked and was uninterested in social customs. He was neglected by the general populace, and the inquisitive boys and women surrounded him as if he were a madman. He thus appeared on the scene while travelling on the earth of his own accord. It appears that upon the inquiry of Maharaj Parikshit, the great sages were not unanimous in their decision as to what was to be done. For spiritual salvation, there are many prescriptions. According there were many prescriptions according to the different modes of different persons. But the ultimate aim of life is to attain the highest perfectional stage of devotional service to the Lord. While such things as doctors differ, so also the sages differ in their different prescriptions. As such things were going on, the great and powerful son of Vyasadeva appeared on the scene. Translation. This son of Vyasadeva was only 16 years old. His legs, hands, thighs, arms, shoulders, forehead, and other parts of his body were all delicately formed. His eyes were beautifully wide, and his nose and ears were highly raised. He had a very attractive face, and his neck was well formed and beautiful like conch shell. Purport. A respectable personality is described beginning with the legs, and this honored system is observed here with Shukdev Goswami. He was only 16 years of age. A person is honored for his achievements and not for advanced age. A person can be older by experience and not by age. Sri Shukdev Goswami, who is described herein as the son of Vyasadeva, was by his knowledge more experienced than all the sages present there, although he was only 16 years old. Translation. His collarbone was fleshy, his chest broad and thick, his navel deep, and his abdomen beautifully striped. His arms were long, and curly hair was strewing over his beautiful face. He was naked, and the hue of his body reflected that of Lord Krishna. Purport. His bodily features indicate him to be different from common men. All the signs described in connection with the bodily features of Shukdev Goswami are uncommon symptoms. His bodily view resembled that of Lord Krishna, who is the supreme among the gods, demigods, and all living beings. Translation: He was blackish and very beautiful due to his youth. Because of the glamour of his body and his attractive smiles, he was pleasing to women. Though he tried to cover his natural glories, the great sages present there were all expert in the art of physiognomy, and so they honored him by rising from their seats. Translation: Maharaj Parikshit, who is always protected by Vishnu, bowed his head to receive the chief guest, Shukdev Goswami. At that time, all the ignorant women and boys ceased following Srila Shukdev. Receiving respect from all, Shukdev Goswami took his exalted seat. Purport: On Shukdev Goswami's arrival at the meeting, everyone except Srila Vyasdev, Narada, and a few others stood up. And Maharaj Parikshit was glad to receive a great devotee of the Lord, bowed down before him with all the limbs of his body. Shukdev Goswami also exchanged the greetings and reception by embrace, shaking of hands, nodding, and bowing down, especially before his father and Narad Muni. Thus he was offered the presidential seat at the meeting. When he was so received by the king and sages, the street boys and less intelligent women who followed him were struck with wonder and fear. So they retired from their frivolous activities and everything was full of gravity and calm. Translation: Shukdev Goswami was then surrounded by saintly sages and demigods, just as the moon is surrounded by stars, planets, and other heavenly bodies. His presence was gorgeous, and he was respected by all. Purport: In the great assembly of saintly personalities, there was Vyasadev, the Brahma Rishi, Narada, the Devarshi, Parshuram, the great ruler of Kshatriya kings, etc. Some of them were powerful incarnations of the Lord. Shukadev Goswami was not known as Brahma Rishi, Rajarshi, or Devarshi, nor was he an incarnation like Narada, Vyasa, or Parshuram. And yet he excelled them in respects paid. This, this means that the devotee of the Lord is more honored in the world than the Lord himself. One should therefore never minimize the importance of a devotee like Shukdev Goswami. Translation: The sage Srila Shukdev Goswami sat perfectly pacified, intelligent, and ready to answer any question without hesitation. The great devotee, Maharaj Parikshit, approached him, offered his respects by bowing before him, and politely inquired with sweet words and folded hands. Purport: The gesture now adopted by Maharaj Parikshit of questioning a master is definitely befitting in terms of scriptural injunctions. The scriptural injunction is that one should humbly approach a spiritual master to understand the transcendental science. Maharaj Parikshit was now prepared for meeting his death, and within the very short time of 7 days, he was to know the process of entering the kingdom of God. In such important cases, one is required to approach a spiritual master. There is no necessity of approaching a spiritual master unless one is in need of solving the problems of life. One who does not know how to put questions before the spiritual master has no business seeing him. And the qualification of the spiritual master is perfectly manifested in the person of Shukdev Goswami. Both the spiritual master and the disciple, namely Sri Shukdev Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit, attained perfection through the medium of Srimad Bhagavatam. Shukdev Goswami learned Srimad Bhagavatam from his father, Vyasdev, but he had no chance to recite it. Before Maharaj Parikshit, he recited Srimad Bhagavatam and answered the... Yes, Maharaj. Maharaj, I am studying, presently pursuing economics honors from Delhi Technological University, DT.
रुक जाओ। थोड़ी देर में ले लूँगा। हो गया। फोन डाल दो। भोग के लेल छै कर
एक हो रहा है। नाम सुधारस गाओ कृष्ण यश राखो बचन मन मोर हरि नाम सुधारस गाओ कृष्ण यश राखो बचन हरि राखो बचन मन मोरा हरि राखो बचन मन मोरा महाविष्णुं जलं तं सर्वतोमुखं नरसिंहं विष्णुं भद्रं विष्णुं नमाम्यहम् जय नरसिंह जय 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 श्री नरसिंह नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी जय राधा कृष्ण सेवा प्रभु लीला की तुम्हार चरण में करवंशा फूला कृपा करी करा वृंदावन नयने नयने हरिगो सदा युगल रूप राशि जय श्री श्री गिरिराज प्रभु की जय हो जय श्री श्री कृष्ण बलराम जगन्नाथ बलदेव सुभद्रा लक्ष्मण नमो नमो नमः वृंदे महारानी तुलसी महारानी नमो नमः जय भगवान धन्वंतरी जय है चक्र जय यशोदा दामोदर की जय यदा दामोदर की जय गाय का खूर है गोपाल शिला जय श्री श्री गोपाल जो की जय